Hey, what's going on everybody? This is TheJackedex here. I'm sorry about the poor lighting. I decided to film this in the afternoon, which probably wasn't a good idea because the sun is beginning to set and I usually like to film when there's enough light, just so that I don't have to worry about trying to get in some artificial light from my bedroom because the light here is not the best for lighting. And we're back for another TheJackedex Unscripted. So today, for TheJackedex Unscripted, I've decided to look at a list of comic book series that I would like to look at in the future on the show, whether that's through requests or just through suggestions from my friends to look at, or just comic books that I saw or I remember seeing or reading when I was a kid, and I thought, hey, I wouldn't mind taking a look at those and doing a review on the series. Now, As I'm doing this list, I'm not doing them in a particular order based on which one I will look at the least to the most. These are just the ones that came and popped into my head when I saw them on a shelf at the library or at the comic store or on my own shelf recently, just up there, really. And I'm not limiting my choices to what I want to look at to these choices, though I do have some limitations on particular comic book series that I probably won't look at just because either everyone else has looked at them or everyone already knows about that series. Though it might be a little bit hypocritical based on the choices that I chose. But, you know, this is my list. These are the series that I want to look at. I've got a list of what I want to look at per here. I want to keep the reasons to why I want to look at these particular comic books short. I won't go into a huge amount of detail because I want to save some of the detail to when I actually review them. So, let's look at the first one on the list. Yu-Gi-Oh! Original, plus Duelist, plus Millennium World. Now, the reason I particularly want to look at the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series as a whole is mainly because ever since I was a kid, when Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters first came out in Australia, I think it was around the early 2000s, around 2000, something like that. And at that time, I was only really reading Pokemon at the time. Well, not reading Pokemon. I was playing Pokemon and watching it. I probably more watched it than I did play it because my sister had a Game Boy Color and she was the one that had Pokemon Blue and she was the one who was allowed to save on it and I was only allowed to go up to Cerulean City. Anyway, so when I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! For the first time, it was around the Waking the Dragon story arc, which was a anime exclusive arc from my understanding. And I just remember that show kind of scared me with some of the characters' backstory. I think it was Raphael who had the backstory with his family getting killed in the tsunami. And even though the show clearly said that they had vanished or gone missing, in my child's mind I was like, no, they died. They had died. You can't change that. There was just something else about Yami Yugi himself, the character himself, that always kind of mystified me. And I think it was because that his character specifically stated that he was Egyptian, and I always find ancient Egypt and Egyptian stuff really mystifying. It's always kind of a mystery kind of culture to me, or a very mysterious kind of country and era in time. I don't know. I just thought it would be a good idea to take a look at the original manga and see how this plays out. I have read the original manga. It is dark. It is a lot more darker than how it actually starts out with the card game with Duel Monsters. And I think it's just a little bit more better developed in the manga with the characters, especially in the Japanese dub. I know there is a bit of hate towards the 4Kids dub with Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't mind the dub personally. My only real problem with it is the script, because of how blatant and repetitive it is on its subject matter. But that's the only real complaint I have about it. Some of the voice actors don't do all that well. Some of them have questionable decisions on voice acting and script adaptation in general. And the edits, the friggin' edits, man, they crack me up. And I just think it would be a good idea to really expose people to what the original intent for Yu-Gi-Oh! Was, because it wasn't centered around just the card game, it was centered around many games, and I think just talking about it and trying to think what was the original author's intent with the direction that he wanted to go before focusing on the card game, I don't know, I just think that would be cool to do. Naruto. Now, with Naruto, it's kind of the same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Here, except this one I didn't fully get into until around high school, and that was about 5 or 7 years ago when I didn't really read manga, I read comics more often, more Sonic the Hedgehog and Batman and Spider-Man and all that. And anytime I read those, they were like books I borrowed from the library or I borrowed from a friend who gave them to me for a while and I gave back to him. And I didn't really read manga up until I got my Legend of Zelda manga from my best friend. But I didn't start collecting manga until Naruto. And the reason I want to look at Naruto is because it's just one of the first shonen manga that really engaged with me, and it really made me appreciate art and animation and just the different kind of styles and characteristics of these characters. I think the characters have such great personalities, they all have engaging backstories, and I don't know, the different powers that they like to show off, and the lore of the world as well. I think it's really cool. I don't know, just because I grew up with ninjas a lot, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and just a lot of martial arts films, I just think looking at Naruto and just sort of, I don't know, I mean that series gets talked about a lot. I just think it would be cool if I just talk about my own experiences with it, just because, I'm a geek, I'm a nerd, I'm into comic books, and when I talk about the series and I talk about my own favorite characters, I eventually want to hear from other people about their favorite characters from Naruto, if they like the series at all. Oh yeah, I guess you could say that Ultimate Ninja Storm, the game series, it got me into it, because it's a flashy game, it's one of the more fun 3D fighters that I have ever played, and yeah, Naruto. The Scott Pilgrim series. Now, I know that this is only 6 volumes long, I know that everyone else has talked about it, I know that everyone else has seen the movie, they've most likely played the arcade game, and they know everything about Scott Pilgrim. I still kind of want to talk about it, just because there's something very intriguing about the art style itself and how much it takes influences from gaming, from manga, from comic books, and just, it's just interesting because I feel like that I'm dissecting an Edgar Wright film that is done in a comic book style. And I know, it's ironic because Edgar Wright did direct Scott Pilgrim, and I think he was the perfect director for that. And I just think, when I do my review on the series, I kind of want to do a comparison review between the comic books and the film, because I'm honestly not a fan of the film, at least not with its adaptation of the characters and the story. I think the action is fantastic, I think the soundtrack is beautiful. I just have problems with some of the casting and with the way the story was done. Because I think it was done a lot more better in the comics, and you could argue, well mate, it's because with films you gotta be able to adapt a film in 90 minutes or so, and that's fine, but with the Marvel films and the DC films to some extent, I hesitate to say the DC films because they're doing a terrible job at adapting some of the movies, except for Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was friggin' awesome. With the Marvel Universe, they're managing to create this big, overarching story involving the Infinity Gauntlet, the Infinity Stones, Thanos, and all of these great characters from the Avengers, Spider-Man, and, they know how to do their own self-contained stories but also implement all of the characters into this big cinematic universe. And I think while Scott Pilgrim is not in that level that demands it to be in a cinematic universe, I think that maybe if it went the Lord of the Rings kind of route, not necessarily 6 films apiece, because I think if they went with 2 films where they did the first 3 films in adaptation, and then they did the other 3, and they spent just as much time on the action as well as the character development, because there's a lot of it, and there are still some unanswered questions from the films that fans would be asking, well, who is this, how do they relate to that, and blah 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 blah. So, I just would like to do a comparison review like that sometime, so there you go. Teen Titans. Now, when I say Teen Titans, I'm mainly talking about the new Teen Titans from when they first came out. I think they were called the New Teen Titans, which had the original founders. Starfire, Robin, he was called Nightwing, I think. What was he called? I believe he was called Robin at that point. Anyway, Starfire, Robin, Cyborg, Raven, Beast Boy, Kid Flash, I think Aqualad was in it, Speedy. Because I did start reading those comic books a while back, and the overarching story was that it involved the coming of Trigon. And Trigon was one of my favorite DC villains at the time. But I also just want to look at Teen Titans because Teen Titans, mainly from the TV series that I used to watch as a kid and even through high school with my girlfriend at the time, there was just a lot that we could relate to because they were teenagers and I was a teenager at that point, and they had some really great life lessons. And while the comic might not necessarily illustrate some life lessons as far as I'm concerned, it's more trying to establish a story and an upcoming threat, I still think it would be cool to see how the comic book series does storytelling. And from what I know, Teen Titans was one of the saving factors from getting DC out of a rut. Teen Titans saved the DC universe. And I just think it would be cool to see how these characters go from Robin being Nightwing, to see Raven become this person who isn't trusted to becoming a part of the family, and I just like to see how these characters grow as natural people. So, there you go, Teen Titans. Spider-Man. Again, the main reason I would want to look at Spider-Man is purely because of nostalgia. And I honestly haven't read a lot of Spider-Man comics. Anytime I've really only been associated with Spider-Man is with the Sam Raimi trilogy. And you could argue that's not the best choice in serious storytelling, but when you think about it, you're talking about a series involving a teenage boy who dresses up as a red and blue spider that shoots webs and takes out ridiculous villains. How much serious are you really demanding from an establishment like that? But that's not the only reason I want to look at it. I want to look at it because, like Teen Titans, I did start reading it recently, and while it's not the best, while it doesn't engage me a whole lot, in fact, I forget a lot of the issues that really happen. Again, I just think it would be cool to look at. I think it would be cool to just look at the best aspects of Spider-Man to see what drew people into the series, what really made it popular. Because sorry, what really made it popular, for me at least, was the character and his adventures fighting all of these great villains. And there's a lot of villains, there's a lot of characters, and though I have really grown up with the films, and I've had to be educated through my then-girlfriend about who these characters are and how they relate and what happened to them, I just think it would be cool if I took a look at them myself and read them and just sort of summarize what I thought about them and if I could recommend them to you guys. Now, the problem with doing the Spider-Man series is that there's a lot of friggin' issues. Like, a lot. And I don't want to have to spend too much time on a series like this because I want to try... Because I don't want to waste my time on a series that I might not even like. It's probably not the most well recommended. And I want to be able to focus on other comic books as well. Like, I don't want to have to spend the rest of my entire life just reading Spider-Man. I like to branch out. I like to be able to read as many of the issues as I can, decide, okay, is this something for me? Is this something I can recommend to other people? And with some of the Spider-Man issues, especially with the early ones, I don't know if I can. If you want to see, like, historical moments, I believe on the Marvel app, they can recommend to you good apps for when Doc Ock, the Vulture, the Sinister Six, or Mary Jane come into Peter's life, and they show how significant it is. So I'm thinking, if I go by the Marvel app's rules and just sort of review the issues that have these characters, that establish these characters, I could just sort of work on that, and I don't have to work on all of these, like, Monster of the Week issues, where it's just sort of, oh, the Vulture is doing this, or the Doc Ock is doing this, and I want to be able to get to the huge story arcs where the symbiote comes in, or where Carnage comes in. And from what I hear, Carnage is a great villain. And from what I've been told, I think it's the 1990s Spider-Man. I think it's called Ultimate Spider-Man, something like that, or The Amazing Spider-Man. That is the one where people hated it because they did something. I'm not entirely sure what the full story is, but they just did some questionable things to the character, and I don't know, if I look at it myself and judge it for myself, I could probably get some comedic material out of it. So, yeah, there we go. Bleach. This is the sort of the one of those other manga that I started reading in high school along with Naruto that I was interested in, but I never really got around to finishing. I actually, I managed to stop reading around the time where the Reapers and the Quincy's started going to war, and I don't know if the manga has finished, but if it has, I think it would be a good time as any, to take a look at it and see if it holds up today. And from my understanding, Bleach is less popular than Naruto, and not a lot of people really know about it, so I think it would be cool to give it a little bit more exposure. And I also just want to look at it because it was one of my friend's favorite manga. I think it's his #1 favorite manga. And I think it would just be a cool way for me to, you know, just say thanks to the guy for introducing me to Naruto and Bleach. So, that's honestly the only reason. The Kingdom Hearts manga. Oh boy. Yeah, so the Kingdom Hearts manga. I've played all of the games. I've yet to read the manga. I hear that it is, that it does some of the adaptations pretty well. They do change some things within the continuity, I think. I don't know. I haven't gotten the full story. But I do remember that it's just one of those manga adaptations that people really like, but I don't really hear them talk about. And it's strange because, you know, with Kingdom Hearts 3 coming out and how much Kingdom Hearts is popular, I think it would just be cool to look at an alternative media that tells the same story, or maybe it tells the story a little bit differently. And from what I've seen, the artwork is really good. I think that the color choice is pretty well for the covers. I think it's kind of hilarious how some of the Disney characters are given a manga makeover, so there's that. And, you know, it just be kind of like looking at the Pokemon manga, just trying to see an adaptation of a video game that was already adapted by a television series which does anime, and you could argue that anime and manga are the same kind of art style. I don't know. I just think it would be kind of cool to take a look at a spin of a story that I already know off heart. Despite how complex it is, I still remember everything that happens in the Kingdom Hearts games in its story pretty damn well, and just see how it holds up. And finally, we have My Little Pony. I haven't talked a lot about My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. I've recently stopped watching the show, not because that it is bad, or that it has lost some form of quality or effort, because it still holds up in those areas really well. And it does bring in a healthy amount of audiences and ratings and a fair amount of marketing. I just think that the TV show has gone on for so goddamn long now that I feel like there is nothing that you can do to really expand on the friendship parts of the series. Which is why I'm turning to the comic book series, because I think there's a lot more world building, a lot more character-driven arcs, and more interesting backstories. Now, I don't know if I would openly say that I am a brony. I did associate myself with being that for a while. But to be a brony, to be a fan, at least a hardcore fan, I think you would need to devote a huge amount of time to really invest yourself in watching everything of the series. The comics, the video games, the show, the films. And I just can't really do that anymore, because I feel like the series has run its course. At least with what they're trying to do with friendship as their main storytelling ploy. So when I look at the comic book series, I'm going to assume that everyone who is watching those videos already knows the lore of My Little Pony. They know about the main six, they know about the elements of harmony, they know about the rulers of Canterlot and Equestria themselves, and they have some idea of the sub-characters. If not, I'm more than willing to give them a brief summarization, but probably not too much, because if I try to establish too much of the show's history into the comic, I'm not sure how much it will connect in continuity and how much inconsistencies that will arise in. And I just prefer to look at the comics themselves rather than the show. That's really all that there is. So, those are the comics that I had in mind to do. I don't think I've missed any. No, I think I've listed off all of them. I know my reasons for why I want to look at these comic books may be a bit vague, but, you know, those are the ones that just popped up in my head. You know, there's just those times where you think, oh, I do kind of want to look at this at some point. It's like when you see a film directed by someone that you really love. For me, for example, Edgar Wright. For someone who hasn't watched Ant-Man, and I know that's directed by Edgar Wright, and I'm a Marvel Cinematic Universe junkie, you know, I do say to myself, I would like to check that out, but I haven't gotten around to it. But I would love to, just I haven't found the time to. And it's sort of the same thing here. When I have the time, these are the comic books that I would love to get into. And I guess that also I guess this just segues into me talking to you guys about what comic book series you guys would like for me to look at. I do have preferences for which comic books I would prefer to look at. It's nothing too nitpicky. It's just I want to try and keep it appropriate, especially with how picky YouTube is with what their creators put up and what is suitable content. And I'm not asking for baby shit. Alright, I'm not asking for baby comics like Archie or I don't know what other baby comics are out there. So if you want to send in suggestions for comic books that you guys think I would enjoy looking at, such as Batman, Superman, X-Men, Kick-Ass, maybe something obscure, or maybe something from European countries such as Tintin, Asterix and Obelix, or hell, even Popeye, or I don't know, whatever you guys think. Until then, I hope to, oh yeah, just one thing. I hope to get the 3 comic book videos ready by the end of this week, so stay tuned for when we take a look at Sonic the Hedgehog issues 16 to 20, the Mega Man 2 adaptation for issues 9 to 12, and then we take a look at the first story arc of Knuckles the Echidna, which we see the introduction to the Dark Legion. Until then, take care of yourselves, have a good evening, and as always, stay awesome, lovely viewers. I'll see you all next time.